Yes, good morning, good evening, everyone. This is Dana from Dev Device. We have another podcast episode with a surprise guest, Mr. Bruce Cryer, the founder of Renaissance Human. And I cannot wait to learn what this is all about. Welcome, Mr. Bruce.
Well, thank you so much, Donna. What a treat to be here. It's great to have met you 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, man, we've been introduced by Tyler Bell, right? Yeah,
Yes,
she's an
exactly.
amazing lady who I had a chat with, I think 2 weeks ago, and she promised to introduce me to some incredible humans that she came across. And you are first on the list, so you must be a very special case, Bruce. I
Wow,
can't wait to learn
I'm
more
honored.
about you, man.
I'm honored. I'm honored. She's got some incredible friends. I've met a lot of really stunning people, fascinating people through her. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's go, Bruce. What are you doing?
Well, right here now, I am in Austin, Texas. I came down here in January to kind of figure out what the next phase of my life was supposed to look like. And the attraction to Austin, partly it's kind of an it place, right? I mean, for the last dozen years or more, people have been flocking, and companies and Tesla and major Apple and Facebook and Google all setting up major headquarters in this town. It's kind of a blue bubble in a red state. It's a area that's been historically much more artistically interesting and progressive socially than the rest of the state of Texas. And many of my friends over the last few years, especially during the pandemic, moved down here. And so I was curious. Plus, I've been living up around New York City for the last 5 years and
Oh,
having spent most of my life in California. But when I moved back to the East Coast several years ago, there were a lot of reasons I went back, and I knew I wanted to be there and was supposed to be there, but I was getting really tired of cold winters. And you live in
I can
Malaysia. You
relate
have
to that.
yeah, exactly. I was
I had my fair share of cold winters, trust me. I spent like 30 plus years in Germany, and yeah, winter started early and ended very late. And yeah, every time uh, I was looking forward to not have another one.
Yeah, yeah. So same for me. So when I came back to New York, that was the downside, was now dealing with real winter again. And this year I just thought, man, I just really don't want to do that again. And I was sort of in between decisions on where to live, and I'd been a bit of a digital nomad like my millennial friends for the last several years, because I
Ah,
took a job back in 2020 to run a graduate school on holistic studies, and that
mm,
required me to move to Connecticut. I thought temporarily, so I stayed in an Airbnb for a couple of months, and then started thinking about, well, maybe I should find another place. And COVID was getting more extreme in terms of lockdown, and moving didn't sound too good an idea. I ended up staying in that Airbnb for 2 years, and
oh,
I was out in Connecticut, and it was pretty far from New York City, so I didn't have much access to New York, where it's kind of my home city, because I grew up near New York City, and I lived in Manhattan for off and on for about 5 years. And it was my career in musical theater. I was a singer, dancer, actor. Started in New York back in the day.
singer, dancer, actor.
That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct. That's how I started. Back, late teenage years actually is when I started all that. So New York has got a lot of juice for me, but December was rolling around, thinking, oh man, I got to get into someplace warm and figure out what I wanted to do next. I still work for a university. So kind of half of my time roughly is spent helping build an integrative health institute inside a U.S. University. But that allows me to work wherever I want, live wherever I want. So I was kind of wide open. So I came down here, and now we're getting into serious summer where it's 37, 38 every day. So
Hmm.
we're talking
Wow.
Celsius.
Hotter
And
than Malaysia. Look at you.
yeah, it's not going to go. It's not going to go down over at least the next couple of weeks, and really throughout the whole summer, it's going to be that kind of weather now till October, pretty much. And I don't think I'll
Wow.
stay here that long. So I'm still kind of finding my way and whether this is the place I want. It's cool in certain ways. Lots of dynamic business energy here. Lots of entrepreneurial things. Lots of
Mhm.
people into biohacking and healthy lifestyle, and so that's all cool and interesting. It doesn't really feel like home for me, however. So
Mhm. Mhm.
California still pulls me. I have a daughter out there, and I
Mhm.
want to be closer to her. So I have a feeling I'll kind of emigrate back to
Mhm.
California at some point. But
Mhm. Have you ever considered living anywhere outside of the US? You know, there's
I
a world outside there,
I have. I've actually been to Malaysia. I've been to Singapore.
Oh,
It was many years
come
ago.
on. You've
Yes,
been to Malaysia.
I
Wow,
have.
that is a rare case, man.
I'm sure. Well, we had back in the HeartMath days, we had a gentleman who ran a training company based in KL, and he brought me over there. I spent about 2 weeks between KL and Singapore, and we went up to Genting Highlands, and I did some kind of a
Oh,
presentation up there for a lot of hundreds of employees, and it was all around
wow.
HeartMath. So
Mhm,
I did a lot of travel during the years at HeartMath, especially when I was CEO, and I spent time in Hong Kong. Cathay
mhm,
Pacific Airways was a client of ours. I went there several times, and a lot of
mhm,
time in Europe. Most European countries I've spent a fair amount of time in, and absolutely I've been drawn to live elsewhere. And it'll be
mm,
interesting to see how the next few years in the U.S. unfold with everything,
mhm,
between climate change and economic chaos and everything else, where I feel open. I mean, I don't have roots that
mhm,
I have to stay anywhere,
mhm.
and
Yeah, yeah.
we'll see.
So what is Renaissance Human stand for? What is this company doing?
Yeah, so Renaissance Human, the term came to me about 7 or 8 years ago when I went through a 2 year period of pretty extreme health issues. I was
Mhm,
diagnosed with stage 1 bladder cancer back in late 2009, and
mm,
luckily surgery got rid of the large tumor. Although they then put me on some immunotreatments to try to make sure it would never come back. I'm now close to 14 years cancer free. So
mm,
they don't say I'm in remission. They say it's gone. That the tumor is gone. It never spread. Every time they checked me, which was regular for quite a while, everything was cool. But in that journey, I started getting staph infections, and then the staph infection spread to my blood, and that's a life-threatening condition where there's like, go to the hospital now, you could stroke and die. And so I didn't. So I'm now, 13 years staph infection free. At the same
mhm,
time, I'd been dealing with arthritis in both of my hips, partly from running on roads for too many miles and too many years. Also, because I have a bit of a scoliosis, so that imbalances my body a bit. So that started to scream. My hips started to scream when my body was dealing with all this other stuff, and now that's getting worse and worse. And I was feeling a really old man, like I'm getting old age diseases. My
mm.
hips are failing, which of course can happen much younger. And I ended up getting double hip replacement surgery as well, and that happened right about 2 months after my mother passed away, and
Oh,
about 3 months before my marriage ended, and I moved out of the family home. So this was
oops.
a pretty intense period, and it was all
Yep.
all during
Sounds
this
like it.
all during this time. I was CEO of HeartMath the entire time, and I was still flying about 100,000 miles per year during all of those surgeries and treatments and all the stuff that I had to deal with. And it was a very sobering time, to say the least. And then my mother passing, although she had been in decline for many years, we knew she would go at some point. It was Alzheimer's. So
Mhm,
it's the reality that she's now gone for sure, and there's no return. And so a lot had been kind of processing in me for a long time, and I realized that I needed to now step away from my leadership role for HeartMath, being CEO, and kind of move into more of an advisory role, which I did in late 2011. And as I exited that, I still consulted to HeartMath for several more years, and I still teach it, and I still coach it, and I actually love it. So I didn't reject.
What is heart math? But I don't quite get it.
I'll get
What
into
is that?
that. It's a whole
All right.
system. It's a whole system that started as a nonprofit research institute in
Mhm,
California to
mhm,
devise simple, powerful techniques to help people lower stress, improve their well-being, improve their cognitive function, their memory, their immune function. And the key to HeartMath, and why it's gained a lot of credibility all over the world now for over 30 years, is the scientific research. There have now been over 400 peer-reviewed studies on HeartMath in the last 30 years, including
mhm,
in major mainstream medical journals, including an article I wrote for the Harvard Business Review back 20 years ago. So it gained a tremendous amount of credibility because there's all this good hard science to it. And I was CEO of that organization for 11 years until I
mhm,
needed to step down. because I needed to kind of move on with the rest of my life. But so in the aftermath of kind of stepping away from this leadership role of HeartMath and kind of moving into healing, fully healing, which was the first priority, get the hips working properly so I can walk and hike again, hopefully. In the process, I discovered this tremendous compulsion, desire to sing again. And that led me to eventually just play with the idea, well, maybe I could even dance again. I've got titanium hips now. Maybe I could even dance again. And sure enough, that all started. And sure enough, my voice was actually really good again, even though I hadn't sung in many years. But I had great training when I was young. I went to a professional music school. So my voice was coming back and my body was coming back. I discovered that titanium hips make for good dancing. You got to
titanium hips.
You got to retrain the muscles and the ligaments. You got to get them stretched out and strong again. But the core is now very strong. So that starts to open up. So little by little, I was like re-exploring this creative side of me, which was very alive in my teenage years and all through my mid-20s when I was an actor in musical theater in New York City and doing commercials and a few little TV and film things. And now it was coming back like 40 years later. And it kind of shocked me, but I was also thrilled. And friends of mine began to refer to me as like, you're like a Renaissance man. You've come back to life. You had 2 life-threatening conditions, and you're doing all this creative stuff that we didn't even know you could do. So I was getting this reference like, you're like a Renaissance man. And I kind of kept pondering that. And I thought, well, I think there's a book I need to write. And maybe it's the story of kind of the Renaissance of me. And I thought, well, I don't want to just call it Renaissance man because that term's been around for a long time. And one day, just the term Renaissance human occurred to me. And I thought, that sounds cool. And I started asking different millennials, friends of mine, like, when you hear Renaissance human, what do you think? Oh, it sounds cool. I want to be that. I said, okay, that's good enough for me. And so I just began.
Is that your target audience, the millennials?
Well, not really. I mean, it's a lot of people my age, boomer age, are drawn to the idea of kind of reawakening the creative spark that's been in us, or giving it a new spark that we never really had. There's tons of people that walk around feeling like, well, I'm not the creative one in the family. Dono is. He's the creative guy. That's why he's off in Malaysia. But I'm not creative, and I was kind of that way in my family, where I actually did not think of myself as creative, even though I had all these musical things I did. I thought, well, my mother's the artist and I got 2 brothers that are artists. They're the creative ones. I'm not creative. So in the aftermath of all the health issues and kind of re-exploring myself as a singer and as a visual artist, photographer, and I do graphics and stuff, let alone as a dancer, this part of me, I'm realizing I am fundamentally a creative person. And I realized everybody is. I have certain gifts that I got exceptional training in when I was younger. So I'm a surprisingly good singer now. I'm a surprisingly good dancer. It's surprising to other people. Like, wow, man, you can move. You had your hips done? No way. No way you're dancing like that with titanium hips. I'm saying, then I go down into a yoga squat and they said, whoa. So it's a fun little story. So Renaissance Human is the name I gave to this kind of body of work that I began to develop around how to reawaken the creative energy in each of us, as happened for me. So I was kind of coming back into old gifts that I had kept on the shelf for some years. So in my case, it was a reawakening, but then I was also exploring new things. And so at one point in 2017, I'd been playing with this idea already of Renaissance Human. And these 2 young singer-songwriter producers approached me. They'd heard me sing. We'd performed together a little bit. And they said, we want to tell you about something else we do with artists. We help you get your music out, and we work with you for several months. We have a process we do, and we'll produce an album together and release it and help you get it all out to market and all that. I said, okay, so does it matter that I've never even wanted to write a song? And they laughed like you're laughing right now. And they said, no, it doesn't, because we see the music in you. We know it's in you. And I couldn't argue with that. Music has been transformative in my life at every phase of my life, from age 8 when I started playing trumpet to age 17 when I started singing and realized I actually had some skill, to age 19 when I got the lead in the longest running musical in the world in New York City. Music's been huge, and in my healing from all the phases of my life, often music was a huge catalyst for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that became Renaissance Human, and then in that same year, when we were creating this album by the name of Renaissance Human, which is out on Spotify and Apple Music and iTunes and all that, Amazon and all that stuff. At the same time, I'd been teaching at Stanford for many years, teaching this HeartMath work. And they knew I'd gone through a lot of health stuff some years earlier. And they said, like, so what else are you involved with? We know you're not just a HeartMath guy. You did that for years. And I said, yeah, I got something else I'm working on. And I started describing this creativity work called Renaissance Human. They got fascinated. And in that meeting, they said, how quick can you develop a 3-part course for us that we can start teaching as part of our employee wellness program at Stanford University?
Ooh.
And so that 4 months later, I was teaching the first cohort, and I'm still teaching it. And it's my work, so I can use it anywhere I want. I teach it at Stanford, but I also teach it online, and I coach people through it and whatnot. So Renaissance Human kind of became the symbol of the fact that my belief that all human beings were born with the power to create life. Power to create life. Now that's an inherent power. Whether or not we're ever involved in creating another life is, to me, beside the point. We're born with the energy of it. And that's creative energy, any way you look at it. And a lot of people had that shut down. You know, they were told, okay, it's fine to have a kid, but don't be an artist. Don't be a writer. You need to be an accountant. You need to be a doctor. That's what our family does. You need to be a lawyer. That's what our family does. I'm sure your family didn't all emigrate to Malaysia. You were pretty, maybe black sheep or the maverick or whatever, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
That was, so I never followed the rules around me. Yeah. And I really resonate with the creative part, because I think humans can be in 2 buckets. They can be in victim mode, or they can be in creative mode. and that makes and that makes all the difference in our lives. So there are those who just keep complaining, and it's everybody else's fault, and I'm just a victim. I'm just on the receiving end of life, and I just have to deal with it and blame. And when I have a good time, it's good. But and then there's a creative mindset where we actually take responsibility, and where we say, okay, what's happening is it's my responsibility. I'm in charge. I'm the one who brings these things to life, and I'm the one who makes my life. So, which is uncomfortable, because it means that all the shit is happening is also my fault, right? So so I can resonate a lot with your creative approach. But I feel like taking your course right now. Like, what is it like? I mean, you teach people to become creative.
Yeah, basically when I was meeting with Stanford that time back in 2017, pardon me, I realized they were wanting to know kind of, well, how would you structure this? And I thought, well, let me kind of put some thought into what did I actually do to get my own creative confidence back, to feel like I can sing again on titanium hips in front of an audience. I hadn't done that in 15 years. I can dance again in spite of feeling kind of pretty nervous about, can my hips manage this? I was an Instagram photographer, not a real photographer. I mean, I didn't do anything beyond posting on Instagram or Facebook. And yet I got a lot of comments from people saying, damn, your photographs are so good. What camera do you use? And I'd say iPhone 5. now I'm on well, that was back when I was starting. Now it's like 11. I'm still only on an 11.
Wow.
People can't believe I'm only on an 11. So all this creative energy was in me. And I began to kind of explore it again, more like reflect on, now that several years later, Stanford was saying, well, give us the course, give it structure. And they trusted me. I'd worked for them for more than 15 years at that point. So they had a high level of faith and trust in what I could do. So they weren't like, you need to show us an outline first. And then it was like, we know this will be great. So how soon can you get it done, kind of thing, which was an awesome feeling to have from an institution like Stanford. So I realized there were like 5, I broke it down into 5 catalysts, is what I call them, which were things I had actually done in the process of gaining confidence that I actually at my core am a creative being, and then recognizing so is everybody else. I just had a certain key advantages through my life that make it easier for me to talk about it than other people.
Mhm.
So I'm going to take full advantage of that, including, a couple life-threatening conditions that awakened it back in me again. I felt like that was a huge gift for me. I wouldn't be singing today if that hadn't happened. I wouldn't be dancing if
Wow.
all that hadn't happened. That wasn't on my list of my bucket list. I just kind of put that in a rearview mirror. Well, that was when I was young. No, not at all. So in the course, I'm kind of laying out these 5 catalysts, which include being mindful, paying attention to what your inner voice is trying to tell you, moving, and this course was designed before COVID, but COVID, of course, changed how we moved so much. Couldn't go to clubs, couldn't go out dancing, couldn't. A lot of people were afraid to even exercise outside for fear they'd catch it even outside. And we're on video conference all the time. So we stopped moving. And I realized for me, sometimes the best creative solution was just to get out of my freaking chair and walk outside, walk to the mailbox, walk to the car, walk to the garbage. I don't care, but move. And because sometimes just in the act of moving, let alone if you're actually moving in ways that you truly enjoy, like walking in a park, or in my case, to dance, often just awakens a creative idea, because I'm doing something that I love to do. I love to move, and the movement itself kind of frees up energy. And then I recognized that a big part of my healing was nature, was being out in nature quietly, absorbing kind of the power and the beauty and the intelligence of nature. I thought that was part of my process too. Had I not been spending, there was one period for 6 weeks I had to have a bag attached on a tube, on a pole into my arm, feeding a very strong antibiotic to try to kill the staph infection that was still in my blood. For 6 weeks, I had to 6 hours a day be hooked up to a bag, 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours at night. That's a lifestyle changer.
Oh yeah,
you're hooked to a pole.
Imagine what that's gonna be. To walk around with a pole.
Fortunately, I could be outside a lot. I could be sitting on my deck if it wasn't too hot and looking at nature, looking at birds, looking at a raccoon staring back at me, whatever it was. And I became more present and just mindful of nature isn't just pretty. It isn't just producing climate. It's not just producing oxygen. Yes, it does all those things, but energetically, it's an incredible source of healing, let alone awakening of inspiration that can happen because you're so still. So that was like the third catalyst, nature. The fourth one is
mindfulness, movement, nature.
The fourth is I call it just playfulness, just the attitude, the feeling of being playful is the creative energy. I call playfulness the wonder drug of creativity, because if you can be in a tough situation and suddenly get kind of playful, usually a creative idea happens, or a log jam breaks. You're stuck, and now the playfulness can be exactly what's needed to kind of, guys, we're gonna get through this. This is cool. Hey, it really could have been worse than this. We had a meeting one time years and years ago at HeartMath when I was CEO, and it was the worst month we had in several years. And we were very open with the company, and we would go through, the financials, not every detail, but high level. How'd we do? And this particular meeting was like, this is borderline scary, because some people could be saying, well, are we going to be able to keep our jobs? And we were confident it was a blip, not a permanent problem. And so when the first slide came up and it showed this huge red loss for the month, I said, okay, so everybody, here's the deal. We have a choice right now. We can either go the route of, damn, start swearing and freaking out, or we can laugh at it and just say, this is the wildest month we've ever had, and let's hope it never happens again. I said, so the choice is ours. I would suggest laughing. And they kind of tenuously kind of giggled a little bit. And then they were kind of getting into a little bit. And then next slide came on. It was another very negative looking slide. I said, okay, which is it? And laughter broke out. And then the laughter kind of had, like, they were kind of enjoying, we're laughing at this. This could be a really dark meeting. And then the next slide, I said, okay, go for it. And by this point, they were like hilarious. They couldn't stop laughing. And the meeting ended, and it didn't change the financial reality, but the next month our sales doubled or tripled. It was like, it was exactly the release valve we needed. And it happened just spontaneously in me in that moment. Like, what are we going to do here? I don't want everybody to be in utter fear. That's the wrong message. So let's just laugh about the whole thing, because it's done. It's dead. We can now recreate. To your point, we get the opportunity to be a victim or be in the creative, and so playfulness to me has that power to shift our mood and our biology and our thoughts and open the Pandora's box of potentials. And then the last one is just artistic expression, that I think it's pretty well established that if you tried to do something you've never done before artistically, like you take a painting class or a sculpture class or a pottery class or a photography class or singing or salsa, anything that's creative, a stretch, like this is not my comfort zone, that in itself awakens the creative energy in us. It awakens the part of our brain that we need in your business, marketing agency. You guys, whether or not you're designing actual art images, the process itself is incredibly creative. I've run marketing marketing departments in companies for enough years to know that you've got to be, if you're in that vibe all the time, that's the enemy of creativity.
Yeah, it's an art form. Yeah, I agree. There's lots of creative parts involved in marketing. Yeah.
So in our course, the last one I finished a couple weeks ago, it was a 7-week online course, about an hour and a half per class. And I kind of go through that model at the beginning, but then the whole 7 weeks, every week, there's some homework for them to do, for the students to do, to express in various ways. The first week is all photography. You're taking 10 photos with your smartphone. You can't use a digital camera. The whole idea is that we have a tool on us all the time for creativity, and most of us use it for selfies and food pictures and dogs, and maybe a baby, maybe a baby or two if we're near. And so I have fun kind of helping people examine how their phone can be a tool of creativity. And we use writing, and we use video and music. And one of the exercises, there's a 30-minute playlist that I give everybody, a Spotify playlist. And it goes through a wild set of musical changes, like from, like classic rock to Mahler to Def Jam to hip hop to Broadway. I mean, it's just to jazz, real kind of a bit jarring changes from time to time if you don't care for that next piece of music. And the activity it's called a doodle playlist. In other words, you doodle with each song and notice how different your doodling is depending upon how you like the song. And so it's just a kind of an interesting creative process of, and everybody gets the freedom to interpret that as they want. I had one lady up in Norway one time. She decided her creative edge was dancing. She was not comfortable as a dancer. So she would just film herself dancing to all those tracks for 30 minutes. Oh. This is somebody who had never danced in public in her life before. And that was what she chose to do as a way of interpreting the activity. So each week there's sort of this beautiful opportunity where people are sharing things from their life. It's their home, their flowers, their children, their grandkids, their cats, their lovers, whoever, through various means. And this is all gets shared every class. And it becomes kind of a creative family. You feel like you're really supporting one another, because people are sharing in some cases somewhat vulnerably, or at least personally. It's something that's meaningful in their life, and they get kudos. They get pats on the back. Often they come and say, "Oh, my photos are just not all that good. I'm really not very creative." I'll say, that's the last time you say that in this class. If you want to say that somewhere else, that's up to you. But I'm not accepting that. The whole premise of this is we are all fundamentally creative. Most of us haven't been given a chance. And that's what this class is for, is to support and celebrate and pat each other on the back and say, that poem you wrote with that little video you did, do you know how moving that was? And the person might say, really? I say, class, am I the only one here? And everybody's saying, yes, that was amazing. So people are being encouraged to recognize, yes, not because we expect them to become professional poets or professional photographers, but to recognize, no, we were made of creative stuff, and just try to prove to me that you're not. You may have been told you weren't, and so you haven't developed it. Yeah, that's true for a huge percentage of humanity. And I had let a lot of it go to sleep, and then I started awakening, and there was like, genie's out of the bottle. It's too late now. I can't go back.
Wow, so you're all about creativity.
Yeah.
That is a very unusual. Yeah, and I never spoke to anyone who was like dedicated to bringing out the creative part in humans. I think that's very exceptional and very inspiring. But we're
Thank
30
you.
minutes in and we haven't done the time travel yet, man.
Ah,
So we haven't gone back to 10-year-old Bruce and checked up on him. So how creative was he? He was already dancing somewhere on Broadway or what?
no, hardly. Not at 10. At 10, I was an all-American little kid playing baseball and touch football and basketball, and I was a good student. I already knew I was like a good student, but it was around that time. It was actually 10. I was just starting to come out of it. I had been so active as a little 8-year-old. I used to go down in our basement, and I had these chalk marks on the floor, and I would do a broad jumping, like from a stand to jump as far as I could and try to keep going farther and farther and farther.
Mm.
But I would do this barefooted, not sure why. And at a certain point, I started regular running would be extreme pain in my heels, and I was 8. And we went to the doctor and they did X-rays and they discovered the separation in the bones of both heels because of the impact of my young heels that were still forming being hit on concrete.
Oh.
So I did this to myself thinking this was just a fun challenge to how far can I go? So for
Mhm.
all of through age 8, in fact, it was the first day of my Little League sign up. I went to sign up for Little League and the doctor said, you can't run or jump or anything for at least 6 months. I was
Mm.
completely crushed. What? I'm an 8-year-old boy who needs to I could still ride a bike, but I wasn't that much of a bike rider at that point. And unfortunately, that lasted for 2 years. I missed 2 years of Little League. And
Mhm.
the next year, I tried to run the first day of gym class. I ran part of the way down the field, and my heels were just in tremendous pain again, and I had to stop for another year. So
Oh.
it was 10, some point at age 10 that I was coming out of that, and
Mhm.
I was able to play in that season of Little League.
Mhm.
And I was in a good class in school, but we were also, my parents were starting to do fairly well in their careers and started designing kind of their dream house. And it wasn't going to be too far away from where we lived, a few miles away. So kind of at the end of age 10 and into age 11, I was part of this project. They'd hired an architect and building kind of the dream home on kind of raw land out in a wooded area, which was
Mhm.
quite exciting to me. And talk about a
Mhm.
creative project. And
Oh yeah.
both of my parents were highly creative, so I was like on the side, kind of not. It's not my project. This was their project, but I was watching it a little bit here and there. And then when we were able to start helping the family and I, doing a lot of interior work to save money. So a
Mhm.
lot of the painting and staining of things, we just all
Mhm.
did that ourselves.
Mhm.
So that whole period of 10, 11 was a lot going on. I was able to exercise again. Finally, I could feel like a little active little guy again. And then this process of the house, and when I was 11 is when we moved. I was a trumpet player, and that was becoming more fun to me, and
Mhm.
I was pretty good at it. So it was like I would just play it in school at that point. A couple years later, my parents decided I was good enough; they'd hire a private teacher for me, and then I kept going with that for 6 more years through high school, and
Mhm.
actually was in the New Jersey Junior Symphony because I was pretty
Mhm.
at some point. But yeah, age 10, Bruce was like things coming out finally, like, oh, finally I can be
Mhm. Mhm.
the little guy that's pretty athletic and pretty fast and
Mhm.
pretty good at sports and do
Cool.
all that again. Yeah.
And then what was the next life-changing experience in Bruce's life?
Well, around age 15 was a really wild ride. It was around 68 for me in 1968. And this was the year two of my brothers, I had 4 older brothers, 2 of them were both in Vietnam. And they were not combat soldiers, but both got injured. One was very seriously wounded. And the same year was the year Martin Luther King was killed, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and they were my heroes. And to have death close in the family one brother nearly died from a staph infection from a wound. He got shot by a sniper while he was a medic in a helicopter
What?
trying to hoist an injured soldier from a battle, and he's shot
Oh.
by a sniper. And if you're going to be shot by a sniper, be in a medical helicopter that can lift off and take you to. So at least there was a silver lining. He survived, and luckily, but that was scary. Then heroes getting picked off one after another, and so it was a very dark year. And right around that same time, a beloved uncle passed away as well. So I remember feeling almost stalked by death. You know, it's like death is everywhere. And where's the inspiration I felt as a kid, and the idealism of my parents that was all about helping the world, not just our country, but how do we? I identified more with the United Nations than I did with just being an American, and was all about peace. And you know, was as a 15-year-old, right around that same time, went down to march against the war in Vietnam down in Washington with 250,000 other people. So I was a very idealistic, positive, peace-loving kid, and then so much of that was really darkened by all the death, and so it was a hard time, and I still didn't have this creative part of me, really. I mean, I was musical in the sense that I played trumpet, but I didn't think of myself as creative in any way at all. It wasn't until age 17 that a teacher thought I had some talent as a singer, and he started working with me, and then he gave me the lead in the high school musical that year, my last year in high school. And 2 years later, I had the lead role in the longest running musical in the world show in New York City. And so, and meanwhile, I was learning dance, and I realized the athletic skill I had when I was younger translated to dance. I'm pretty coordinated. I can move in ways that other guys are stiff. So that was fun. I was learning mime. I was learning carnival technique. I learned how to eat fire and lie on a bed of nails, and fun improv stuff. And so that whole side of me was starting to emerge kind of in my late teenage years. But we're in the time travel, so I've kind of taken over the journey here. What's the next question?
No. This is about you, like getting all the way from being 10-year-old to Bruce of today. So this is just about finding all these milestones that have happened, that have changed your ways, and this crucial crossroads that you had to take to go towards a certain profession, or to pick a certain study or job or entrepreneurship or whatever it was. So I mean, we all have these crossroads where we have to make a choice, right?
Exactly. Well, and the other part, because I described that period around age 15 of so much darkness because of the world, both my personal world of family members, brothers in harm's way, in a war I was against. They were against it as well, but they had no choice. And at the same time, I was drawn to writers like Henry David Thoreau, who was considered a transcendentalist author, and Ralph Waldo Emerson. And these were authors from the 1800s who were way ahead of their time. And they were quoting Hindu texts. They were quoting the Bhagavad Gita back in the 1850s. And I was fascinated by these Americans, many of whom lived in sort of the New England part, up north of New York City. And they helped me open to a spiritual side of me I hadn't experienced through the way I was raised, which was rather traditional Christian church. And I began to experience almost like the feeling of God around me, or in the woods, or in nature, whatever.
Wow.
And this was a wonderful experience. And of course, this was the 60s. And so there was a lot of expansion going on in different ways. And transcendental meditation was kind of hitting America thanks to the Beatles, and gurus were a thing. And I started getting interested in yoga and started reading books on spirituality in my late teens. And found a tremendous resonance with all of it. And meanwhile, I was kind of intrigued by studying health and nutrition, and just felt like I need to get into this. And the more I would get into spiritual things, the more that would lead me to my health. And the more I would study health things, it would lead me more into spiritual things. And so I was getting very intrigued and became a raw foods vegetarian for a while, which I did not recommend. And it caused me to not get enough protein and to actually faint. At one prominent time, the way I was doing it was not working. But I was exploring ways to expand my own awareness, my own consciousness. Meanwhile, I was now living, I finished my years at college. I was now living in New York City. I was a full-time professional actor, singer, dancer, living in Manhattan in a series of shows. I went back in the show I'd been in when I was 19 in New York. I went back into that historic show. And I was living kind of a dream life. I mean, I had a lead role in a world famous musical. I had a wonderful girlfriend who was a super talented actress in her own right. But I found myself more and more in my kind of off time pulled back into the spiritual studies, into the psychology studies, and into health studies. And that became more important to me than what my next acting job was going to be. And I started to notice it one day. All your free time is not on perfecting your acting or your dance or your singing. I mean, I was doing some study of that, but I was like reading books on Silva mind control and on autobiography of a yogi, which was incredibly impactful to me that was like a huge turning point. The autobiography of Paramahansa Yogananda, who was one of the first Indian gurus to come to the U.S. and still has a significant influence here. And so all of that was going on. And here I was in this show, which this particular show is called The Fantastics, which many Americans, especially New Yorkers, know the show. It was open for 55 years in New York City. Ooh. And I did about 800 performances, 800, while I was in the show. 800, yeah. So it was an amazing show, wonderful show. I was the boy. It was a story about a boy and a girl. It was a love story. I'm the romantic lead. I mean, what's not to love about this show? It was humorous. The music was enchanting and extremely memorable. And but I found myself again, like between acts. I was going back to my dressing room and reading a book on spirituality, or a book on yoga, or a book on meditation, or a book on psychology. And those were the interests. And I realized, like, when I was in the show for so long, I mean, you're obviously not having to try to remember your lines. That you're completely on automatic. And that's the downside, is that you get completely on autopilot and you lose the humanity coming through your character. You're just doing it because you know how to do it, and you know how to walk there and sing there, and you've got it dialed in. But I found my attention drifting to the audience and curious how that lovely couple, they look like they're from Kansas, and that looks like their daughter that's sitting with her. And I wonder how they're responding to this. I wonder if they'll remember this on Monday morning when he's back at his accounting job and she's back at school teaching, whatever it was. And I would just imagine their lives and imagine, am I making any impact on them? I am right now. They're loving it right now. They're looking at me like wow, this is amazing. And they're applauding and all this. And I'm thinking, wow, I can make an impact on people for a few hours. But by Monday morning, are they still remembering? Probably not. And I thought, well, I want to make a longer impact than that. But I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know how to do that yet. I know I'm good at acting. I know I can sing, and people love my singing. But I don't know how to really impact a person's life beyond a short term. And so that's when my girlfriend and I, who, as I say, she was an actress, extremely skilled in her own right, we left New York and moved to California. And we packed up our motorhome. We had a motorhome. We had done well. And we packed up our motorhome and moved to a mountain community, which would become my home for the next 35 years.
35 years.
35 years. And
now we're talking. So,
California.
So from Broadway hero, you just moved to California, but not to Hollywood.
Not to Hollywood. I was not.
Mountain community where you're just living from a motorhome.
Well, that's what it sounds like. I mean, we got a house within a few weeks, and I started. We were connecting to what had drawn us was there was a publishing company that also had a university, a small private university, very small, mostly correspondence types things in this town. And they were doing really interesting things. They were publishing remarkable books on the intersection between consciousness and science. And they were doing that in the mid 1970s. Today, that's been done a lot, but back in the mid 1970s, there were very few credible books linking leading edge science, real science, with spiritual concepts. So we were both drawn to this, and we began to work for this organization several months after we got there. And eventually I became general manager of the publishing side of what they were doing, and found that I had a certain knack with that, with editing and publishing, and then discovered I had a certain knack with graphic design. And we had an art business in New York briefly, so there was an artistic side of me, but I wasn't giving myself any props for that yet. I was just like, oh, I think I can figure out how to design a catalog. But then it came out like people said, you designed that? Yeah. Wow. Okay. I guess I got some. And gradually, within a few years of being in California and working with this organization, there was a very curious guy that came by one day to one of our courses at the university. And he was from the south of the U.S. and had a very strong accent, almost hard to understand. He was such a thick accent. But I found him incredibly intelligent and interesting and caring and intuitive. Like, he would say things, and I was like, how did you know that? How could you possibly know that? You're just a very intuitive kind of person. 10 years later, he founded HeartMath, the HeartMath organization. So I had this kind of meeting with him over several days, which created a strong connection and bond. And I kind of never forgot that. And then some years later, he reconnected with me and others, and I became part of the core team when HeartMath started back in around 1990. And in that same town, coincidentally, he decided that town, which was kind of in a redwood forest, only 45 minutes from Silicon Valley, only an hour from Stanford University, only an hour and a half from San Francisco, only 30 minutes from the Pacific Ocean. It was kind of a very unique place with access to some of the best minds in the world, Silicon Valley, Stanford, San Francisco, some of the most creative people in the world. So much started in that kind of part of California. So many businesses, so many creative ideas, so many human potential movements, et cetera. So that's where HeartMath started. And I was part of the core team for the next 20 years. And 21 years until 2011, which is when all that health stuff was going on. And I was CEO by that point. From 2000 to 2011, I was CEO of the for-profit side of it. But then that was the point in late 2011 where I realized it's time to heal, and it's time to see what needs to unfold next. At which point, over the next few months, the whole creative urge started to happen, and singing, and realizing I actually could dance, and then actually being hired to, instead of give a keynote talk, the health system hired me to do a keynote performance. And I brought in this amazing composer, performer, dear friend of mine, and we did this together in front of 500 healthcare doctors and nurses of a huge system in the US called Kaiser. And I was suddenly performing for 2 hours in front of an audience of health professionals. And I hadn't been on stage like that in 20 years. And it was like, wow, how did I get here? And I told about having had cancer. I told about that I was starting to get strong again, and my hips were getting better, and I was starting to dance again. But the whole spirit of that, what we called a keynote performance, was asking everybody the question, what makes your heart sing? This was an audience of health professionals who were getting burned out. But they had chosen a profession, healthcare, which you don't pick it for the hours or the money or the fame. I mean, some doctors can make a lot of money, but everybody else doesn't. So you don't do it for that reason. You do it because of usually some deep, innate desire to care for others. And so through my friend's brilliant musical genius and artistry, we were creating this keynote performance to help awaken what inspires people about why they started to be in that line of work in the first place. Why did you start? It wasn't the hours, the fame, or the money. It was because you care, and let's help you get back in touch with that. So that was called What Makes Your Heart Sing. And as we did that over the next few years, this creative side of me was getting fed, and it had a voracious appetite. So we found more places to do it. We traveled to Italy a couple of times and did this keynote performance in Italy and around the United States in different conferences. And by that point, it was like, I have to I can't just give a talk anymore. I have to talk and then also sing or get the audience dancing. I mean, I have to use more of me than just the vocal part, the talking part.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I got to awaken parts of people that's not just their mind.
Mhm.
And so that led to the Renaissance Human and singing, and then an album called Renaissance Human, and now, you know,
Oh,
HeartMath has never left me. It's a powerful system. The techniques are, you know, the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, I'm sure, and
yeah, yeah. I'm following him quite a bit on YouTube. Yeah.
he talks a lot about coherence. He talks about heart coherence preceding brain coherence. If you want to go into incredible states in your mind and the ability to really be a creator of your life, your brain needs to be coherent. Well, he started working with HeartMath 15 years ago and began to realize the heart needs to be coherent first, and then the brain can be coherent because the heart's a much bigger electrical and magnetic generator. So Joe, who's a personal friend of mine, Dr. Joe,
Wow.
is a big proponent of this idea of heart coherence, allowing us to get brain coherence. Heart coherence comes from HeartMath. HeartMath is the creator of that concept. And so I teach people how to get into heart coherence. And I've been doing
So
it
how does that work?
30 years. Well, it's you know,
Is there a short version of that, like how to get your heart coherent?
yes, there is. So what we discovered were a couple of things is that number one, as millions of people now understand, our breath is central to our healing, to our nervous system's regulation, you know, the vagus nerve, et cetera. So breathing is super, super important. And there's a zillion different techniques and a lot of schools of thought of what you do. When HeartMath was created, we wanted people to breathe in a regulated way, roughly 5 seconds as you breathe in and roughly 5 as you breathe out. And that was not random. It wasn't like, oh, let's pick 5. We could have done, like, there was a vote, 7, 3, let's just, no, 5 was based on science, that the rhythm of a 5 second in, 5 second out, it's called the RSA, the respiratory sinus arrhythmia. And it's a very efficient rhythm for the whole system to be operating at. So we said, let's use that as the guide. And then we ask people to focus in the area of their heart as they're breathing in the slower rhythm. And just doing those two things, breathing and focusing in the area of the heart, can bring what's called our heart rate variability, which is how our heart changes speed over time. Most people don't know that just sitting here calmly, having a great conversation with you, Dono, or people listening, they wouldn't realize their heart is varying as much as it is. It's not beating in a steady rhythm. It's not. It's going up for a while. It's going down for a while. And maybe an alert comes on your phone, and so your attention is taken for a moment. So it spikes up a little bit more because of that alert. But there's this constant rhythm that's speeding up for a while, slowing down for a while, speeding up for a while, slowing down for a while. For most of us, because of stress, i.e. fear, anxiety, etc., the pattern looks chaotic. It looks kind of like an earthquake. And this is true across all humans, basically. It can be intensely chaotic, like anger or hostility, or it can be more moderately chaotic, like anxiety or worry or depression. But in all cases of, quote, stressful emotions, the pattern does not look ordered. It looks chaotic.
You mean the heartbeats per minute?
How the heart is changing speed looks chaotic. It's all over the place. It's not
Okay.
predictable. But we found out that just slowing down the breath, because the breath and the heart are absolutely intricately tied together, just slowing down the breath will tend to even out the rhythm. So now it starts to rise as you breathe in. It evenly rises for 5 seconds. And then as you breathe out, it evenly declines for 5 seconds. So just the breathing in and out will bring more order, more coherence to the rhythm of the heart. But more important than that discovery, which is not a small discovery, but just focusing on your heart. Like, let's say you've heard some terrible news, like shocking news or worrying news. And it's a perfect time to just, okay, we haven't heard the whole story yet. Let's try to stay calm until we know what we can really do here. So just breathing in for about 5 into your heart and breathing out for about 5 out through the heart. That's a powerful way to just stabilize your system when you need it. But we found that the next step beyond that, and this is very much akin to the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, is he talks all the time about living in the future emotion. Imagine how you're going to feel when you achieve that part of your that dream, that vision in your life. And so you're practicing positive emotions. And HeartMath had 30 years ago said more or less the same thing. You need to practice feeling appreciation. Like right now, it may be hard to feel it, but if you're really honest with yourself, there's this you're appreciative for. There's this person that you love. There's this beauty that you see every day. There's this part of your life that you have conquered. You have accomplished that, dude. Don't forget that. You can be grateful for that. And so as we start to get into a state of appreciation or gratitude, whichever you want to call it, and continue this steady breathing, we start to retrain our system, our heart, into what we call heart coherence, which Dr. Joe, is now a significant proponent of. He wrote a whole chapter on it in his most recent book, Becoming Supernatural, a whole chapter on heart intelligence, which is the work of HeartMath. And so heart coherence is the state where you're able to be in this smooth rhythm where the heart is beating under your control instead of emotions deciding how your heart's going to beat. And it's a skill. It's a skill like anything else. I mean, when I started being a dancer, my body was stiff. I wasn't coordinated like I became. My body was not flexible like I became. And with the heart, it's similar. You start at a certain place, and as you practice more and more, you learn how to regulate it more easily. You become more adept at neutralizing negative stress feelings in the moment they're happening. You get bad news, and wait a minute, start to breathe. And so heart coherence is central to the whole concept of HeartMath. And now it's also central to the work of people like Joe Dispenza and also Greg Braden. Greg actually got trained to teach HeartMath because he's such a big fan of the work of HeartMath. So part of my work, even though I'm not employed by HeartMath and haven't been for some years, is I work with executives and entrepreneurs, groups, to train them in these techniques of heart coherence, so that it can become a second nature, like riding a bike, like anything you get good at where you know how to do it. You've got certain marketing skills, certain graphic design skills that are just completely second nature to you. And other people are like, how do you do that? Well, I've been doing it for 30 years. What's like that with HeartMath? You know, people say, how do you get coherence so fast? Well, I've been doing it for 30 years.
And what is the outcome of this coherence? So what is the benefit, so to say?
Well, yeah, fortunately, this is where all the studies have been really useful. On the pure level of physiology, the actual functioning of the heart improves because you're now in control of it instead of kind of being the victim of your own unmanaged emotions. That can translate. There were studies that have been published in peer-reviewed journals around people practicing HeartMath and lowering their blood pressure. People practicing HeartMath and improving their blood levels, people who are diabetic. People practicing HeartMath and finding memory improvements, increased cognitive function, increased reaction speeds. At the level of organizations, they've seen healthcare costs come down because people are not sick as much because they're sleeping better, and they've been able to measure sleep's improving. So if you are able to lower the amount of self-induced stress, so much of it is. I mean, it's our reaction is the thing. 10 people hear the same news, and you got 10 totally different physiological reactions going on. If we can learn how to neutralize some of that, we can physically change dramatically. So I'll throw out one little interesting statistic. So I turned 70 in a month.
Oh.
And most people do not believe that I'm really close to 70. And I say, why would I lie up? You know, if anything, I would lie the other way. 2 years ago, I had a medical test done. This was 2 years ago. And it showed my biological age was 36.
What?
And I was 67. And the guy who did the test, I said, wow, you made my year with this data. I had no idea that I'd be anything. I mean, I knew I was younger than my age. I mean, everybody guesses I'm 20 years younger or roughly than I. And I knew just my attitudes. I'm more playful. I'm more spontaneous. I'm more youthful, and just how I live. But I wasn't thinking I was that youthful. I said, so have you ever seen anybody? That's a 31-year age difference between what the birth certificate says and the body. And he said, no, I've never seen more than about 20. And I said, he said, so is it all because of HeartMath? And I said, well, I can't say it's all because of HeartMath, because I also, when I was at HeartMath, I got cancer and I got other stuff. So I can't say it's just because of HeartMath. But HeartMath gave me an incredible foundation to be able to bounce back from all those things in ways that a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to. But also, I think in the last 10 or 12 years, since I've been more, quote, on my own, I have kind of accepted the range of feelings that I have in myself, and kind of honored when I'm sad. There's been a lot of grief in my life. I've lost 3 brothers, both parents, many other family members, friends, whether it was during COVID or the AIDS epidemic, et cetera. There's been a lot of that in my life. And I'm divorced, and a lot of things that didn't go as I had hoped, right? And like everybody. But for me, I think as time has gone on, I have learned to really feel the sense of loss of something or of someone, but at the same time, remember who's the man that I want to be, and that's a man who embraces all the sides of me, but doesn't get stuck there. So I think it's the ability to kind of move on, to kind of let go of the expectation, let go of the fear of giving in to the sadness or the grief about someone, to allow myself to feel that so that I can get through the other side. And so I think I'm able to move through things better than I used to, and better than maybe, and I think part of that, a lot of that is the foundation I have from HeartMath. And some of that is remembering I got a lot of tools. I can dance, I can sing, I can go down to the pool and sit in the sun, which is what I'm going to do next. I got things I can do to shift my mood. And I'm very grateful that I've been exposed to so many things over the years. And so I want to give that to others. I want to, whether it's teaching a course on creativity and have a group go through that experience together. When a group's doing it, it's really precious, because you kind of fall in love with each other. It's like, wow, that thing you just shared was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. This last class, I had a lady from Iran calling in on Zoom from Isfahan, Iran, every week. Another guy calling in from Abu Dhabi. He's Tunisian. Another woman in France. Another a Chinese woman in Montreal, and then random Americans and a few Brits. And
so it does happen online. Your classes are happening online.
I do online. We had to, and plus, yeah, it's a lot easier. So the creativity stuff I can do online, and even when it comes to coaching people around this heart coherence concept and what are those tools to anchor into your life, you can do all that with Zoom. I love being in person. Don't get me wrong. I love. I got a chance to do a couple of workshops last week up in a conference and live in the room with people, and then got to perform live in a concert venue with people. And that's so wonderful. But thank God we're used to this now. And so this is a real, hopefully people learn something from this conversation,
Yeah. I'm very confident that I learned a lot of stuff from this conversation. That's, the stuff that you have been doing and the stuff you're doing today is very, very exceptional. I really would love to learn more about your techniques and kind of acquire and learn some of these things, because I happen to be a big fan of Joe Dispenza. I somehow came across his YouTube videos, and I was very impressed with what he had to say about how humans can evolve and become who they want to be and all that. So this is always a very exciting topic to me, and you seem to have mastered big parts of this. So this would make you my Sifu moving forward in some shape. I like the Sifu concept. I've been doing Kung Fu for 20 over years, so we always had this master who is, the authority, who taught, who knows the way. So you. So to me, in that sense, you are a Sifu. You know the way. So
thank you.
I would love to stay in touch, and I'm very confident that this podcast will have a lot of insights for the listeners. We are at 1 hour and 4 minutes, which is a new record on my channel. But there's a reason for that. So there's no time wasted here. I'm very happy to have look, I'm German, so I'm bad at these closing statements. But man, thank you so much for being here. Let's stay in touch, and let's open the description part for those who want to get in touch with you. We will put all your details there, so people can reach out to you, can join your courses, and let's see how this goes. I'm excited.
Thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure to meet you. And although I did like 98% of the talking, I loved your input. I loved your responses. I loved your light bulbs going on for you.
Of course. This is about you, man. Yeah. And I mean, you are a showman. I mean, you don't need guidance. You don't need a script, so you can just get on stage and perform. So yeah, you're great at that.
Thank you. And I've had a lot of experience, that's for sure. But I was also acknowledging that you have. I mean, I've been on a lot of interviews, for years since I was an actor, and a lot of it was just whatever about a show or about whatever the topic was. But lately, I've been on more and more podcasts. This is about the 20th, and since I moved to Austin in 4 months ago, they just keep on coming. Several, thanks to our mutual friend Tyler Bell. Several came through her, actually. But I find that I love to do them. And some interviewers have the 10 questions that they've got to get through no matter what. And others are really wide open and genuinely curious and are just really so present that it makes me even want to share more, because I can see the kind of hunger in the host, in you. So it's very satisfying for me to talk with somebody who is so open and so genuinely curious. And so it enables me to share even more. Whereas if I get a sense of, okay, you've gone long enough answering that question, because the next question needs to come next. Well, that feels artificial. Yeah. So thank you for how you are as a host. It was great. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. I appreciate it. It was my big pleasure. And I can just say it was great to have you. Thank you, Tyler, for introducing us. Man, let's do this again sometime. Let's explore some other topics. I'm sure we just scratched the surface today.
Yes, indeed. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, man.